Here we go again on another local excursion to a place called Hazen, Nevada. So let's jump off. Most social media people say, let's jump in. We've all heard of Las Vegas, and we've all heard of Los Angeles. But where is Hazen? So a quick look at a map is in order. This video is going to take us on an aerial trip from Hazen to Fort Churchill, Nevada, and it concerns the Hazen cutoff. The Hazen cutoff was built in 1905 from Hazen, Nevada on the Southern Pacific Main Line down to the Southern Pacific connection to the south that at the time went up the Carson River to Mound House, Nevada, and then they connected to the Virginia and Truckee Railroad that got them to Reno. But there was a lot of contention and disagreement that caused H.R. Harriman, the president of the SP at the time, to try to buy out the Virginia and Truckee Railroad, but they refused, which turned out to be a bad decision for them. So he built this standard gauge line from Churchill to Hazen, and that connected to the Southern Pacific line from Reno in a more direct way, a 28-mile stretch. It was a bad decision on the part of the Virginia and Truckee because very shortly afterward, the Tonopah and Goldfield mining boom started, and they made a lot of money on this line. They had a lot of trains going back and forth. There was a time when you could actually go to Las Vegas on this line and all the way to Los Angeles. So it was a north-south route across the Nevada to get up to the Southern Pacific line. The railroad paralleled the Truckee Carson Canal, which was a big project of the time. Became the Truckee Carson Irrigation District that created Fallon. And next to it, we'll see Lahontan Dam and the Lahontan Reservoir and the Carson River. We're approaching Hazen from the east. The curving rail line right below us is the SP, now UP, main line that goes to Salt Lake. In the other direction, straight ahead, it goes to Fernley and then Reno, Nevada, and on to California. The triangular track formation ahead of us is called a Y. That was a way they turned trains around. In the middle of that Y, there used to be railroad shops there. They had complete facilities, including a small roundhouse. The Hazen line now goes under the 4-lane highway overpass you see on the right. Our Y there on the left, lower hand left, and then the underpass under the highway that goes to Fallon. This line now only goes as far as Hawthorne, Nevada, but it's still an important line due to the big ammunition plant. They have miles of facilities. The Empire still needs a lot of ammunition and bombs and missiles and God knows what else there. During the Second World War, this was really a busy line. They had 20 trains a day going back and forth to the ammunition plant. It was so busy that they had to set up a centralized traffic control from Sparks, Nevada. The Truckee Canal is appearing on the left side there, which that takes water out of the Truckee River between Fernley and Reno and diverts it down to Lahontan Reservoir. The Truckee Canal was started building in 1903. It's 13 feet wide and about 32 miles long. Hazen was a central location for the construction forces for the canal. There were thousands of men and animals working on the canal. Hazen was a notorious place of crime and drinking. There were 50 saloons in Hazen, and when you walk around there you can see glass for 2 miles. The last lynching in Nevada was at Hazen in 1905 when a notorious outlaw named Red Wood was hung. They'd left Red hanging from a telegraph pole for several days as a message to the others. Red's gang left town. Welcome to the Wild West. The canal is mostly concrete lined. They built a railroad down the middle of it to run steam shovels, which were kind of getting perfected at the time. They were the Marion shovels, the same kind that dug the Panama Canal. There's the site of Bango Section Camp. Railroad still had section camps into the early 1960s. When I was in high school, I had a Mexican buddy whose father worked at Bango Section Camp. We used to drop him off in the morning on the way to the lake to go spend the day fishing. There used to be section camps for railroad workers every 10 miles or so, but they were phased out in the late 50s. They did have steam shovels for the canal, but otherwise it was mostly animal power. There was no excavation equipment as we know it today. So there were thousands of animals with scrapers digging and moving dirt. And a lot of hand labor. Those were tough workers. When you think of all the form work, even just the carpentry had to be hand nailed. No wonder they wanted to get back to Hazen, to the 50 saloons on their weekends. Lahontan Dam, right below the left wheel, was another momentous project that was completed in 1912. We often think of our own time as one of technology, innovation, and progress. But we don't think of the decades around the turn of the 20th century as being like that. But actually, during that period, there was more fundamental technological progress and innovation. The 1880s had the first electric light. They had Pasteur with vaccines. They had Lord Kelvin on the atomic theory. Carl Benz, the first car engine. Tesla Westinghouse electric motor. Heinrich Hertz discovers the radio waves. Wireless telegraphy. The diesel patent in the 1890s. 1893, Ford's first car. Carl Benz's first car. 1895, Röntgen discovered X-rays. Marconi, radio telegraphy. Lumiere, the motion picture camera. 1897, J.J. Thomson discovers the electron. 1898, Madame Curie discovers radium and polonium. 1899, Rutherford, alpha and beta rays. The first magnetic recording. 1900, Max Planck, quantum theory. Fessenden, transmission of speech via radio waves. Freud wrote about dreams. 1901, Marconi, radio telegraphy from the US to the UK. 1903, the Wright brothers, the first powered flight. Ford Motor Company founded. The first coast-to-coast car trip across the U.S. 1904, the Panama Canal started. Freud writes The Psychopathology of Everyday Life. In art, Picasso, Salvador Dali. The first music on radio. 1905, Einstein's theory of relativity. Rayon is discovered. The first regular cinema was established. The first neon sign. 1906, after Upton Sinclair's book called The Jungle about the horrible meatpacking industry, the Pure Food and Drugs Act is passed. 1907, in the art world, Cubism and Picasso. Color photography. The first comic strip, Mutt and Jeff. 1908, Bakelite, the first plastic, was invented. General Motors Corporation formed. Wilbur Wright flies 30 miles in 40 minutes. The first Ford Model T, which ended in 15 million copies over its production life. 1909, Frank Lloyd Wright pioneers modern architecture. Blériot crosses the channel in an airplane. Farman makes the first 100-mile flight. Peary reaches the North Pole. The first commercial production of Bakelite. The Plastic Age begins, or what is otherwise called the Polymer Age, our age. 1910, the Mexican Revolution starts. Farman flies 300 miles in 8.25 hours. Barney Oldfield goes 133 miles an hour in a Benz car. 1911, Amundsen goes to the South Pole. Rutherford describes atomic structure. Charles Kettering invents the electric starter for automobiles, thus allowing women drivers to take over and men drivers to stop breaking their wrists on crank starting. 1912, Jung and Adler revolutionize our understanding of human psychology. London has 400 cinema houses. In the U.S., 5 million people a day go to movies. Cellophane plastic wrap becomes ubiquitous. Protons and electrons are discovered. The Titanic, technological marvel, sinks. The first successful parachute jump is made. After those unsuccessful jumps, that guy had a lot of temerity to try it again. 1913, Eder Geiger invents a device to count alpha rays. Niels Bohr describes atomic structure. Henry Ford perfects mass production on an assembly line. 1914, world order is upset by some Serbian assassins in Sarajevo, beginning the First World War. Mr. Jeans proposes a new theory called quantum theory. The Panama Canal is opened. 1915, the Lusitania is sunk, bringing the United States into the European War. Einstein's general theory of relativity is published. The first U.S. transcontinental telephone call is made. Ford production reaches 1 million cars. An auto speed record of 102.6 miles an hour is made in a Stutz Bearcat. 1916, the theory of shell shock, what we now call post-traumatic stress syndrome, is developed due to the First World War. Daylight saving time to make more time for factory workers in the war. Francisco Pancho Villa raids Columbus, New Mexico. General Blackjack Pershing spends 2 years looking for him to no avail. Submarine sonar detection is invented to stop the German submarines sinking our stuff. 1917, Freud writes the introduction to psychoanalysis. The Russian Revolution begins. German aircraft attack London. The first tank battle. Jung writes the psychology of the unconscious. Picasso and others develop surrealism to help explain the messed up world we're in. The Balfour Declaration on Palestine begins the current mess that we're in. 1918, over 1,000 German aircraft assemble on the Western Front. The last battle, the Battle of the Marne, occurs with 168,000 casualties in 3 days. Regular airmail service begins. The influenza pandemic takes 22 million lives. The armistice is signed November 11th. World War I tally is 8.5 million killed and 21 million wounded in action. 1919, the first massed spectrograph is built, establishing the phenomenon of isotopes. The modern weather theory of frontal mass begins. The first London to Australia flight happens. The first non-stop flight across the Atlantic by 2 British aviators. The 18th Amendment establishes the prohibition of alcohol. Just when everybody needs to take a couple of drinks. Right below is the site of Fort Churchill, the 1860 U.S. Army post. This was a strategic location in the days when you had animal transportation that needed water and feed. It was part of the Central Overland Route, developed by Captain James Simpson in 1858. This green canyon is Churchill Canyon, and it was a branch of the California Trail. It was called the Sonora Route. The canyon comes out into Mason Valley and the city of Yerington just beyond. A tail gunner view showing Lahontan Reservoir and Silver Springs. Fort Churchill now appearing below us. It started in 1860, and it was an army base with 200 soldiers. Seeing the contrast of the surrounding desert with the river bottom greenery gives you an idea of the strategic importance of this place. In the horse and mule era, there is no way you could get through the desert without these little slivers of water and feed for your animals. So a modest river like the Carson River was really important in the American history of the Old West. The Carson and Colorado Narrow Gauge Railroad turned into this canyon after leaving Carson City in the 1880s. Churchill Station was located here. Around 1900, the Southern Pacific Railroad bought the Carson and Colorado Railroad and standard gauged it. In 1933, the branch that ran up the canyon to Carson City was abandoned. The route to Hazen remains to this day. These are all remnant branches of Pleistocene, Ice Age, ancient Lake Lahontan. In the upper left-hand corner is the playa called Misfit Flat, where the 1961 classic movie was filmed. It was the last movie of Clark Gable, who died before its release of a heart attack. And it was the last movie of Marilyn Monroe, who died a year later. Some researchers are now saying that the evidence shows she was suicided. A 100-foot drone shot at the end of this video. The railroad heading off to Hazen, coming around to the remnants of historic Fort Churchill, which is now a state park. Very interesting place to walk around. Preservation efforts started in 1932. The adobe walls were coated with a preservative, so they still stand today. The fort was named in honor of General Sylvester Churchill. American General Churchill was a distant relative of Winston Churchill. Winston said he could see the family resemblance in a portrait of the American general. Coming around to the west, looking towards Dayton and Carson City. The park includes riverside campgrounds, but I wouldn't eat any of the fish there. That's been heavily contaminated with mercury from the mills up in the canyon below Virginia City. The railroad heading out to the south through Churchill Canyon. You come out at Mason Valley and Yerington. Back at Hazen, 3 girls early in the century sitting on their father's speeder. The hardy section crews had to go about 10 miles on these things in blazing summer heat, in snowstorms, at night, whenever they were called. The comfortable passenger cars whizzed by, looking down on them. But their attention to every spike and every bolt and every irregularity made the railroad possible. In the saga of railroading, they are unsung heroes. Nobody has written much about them. The men with wrenches and hammers and picks, what we call nowadays essential workers.